She bit my arm and whispered, "Mine. Now everyone avoids me." Marcus Chen had always considered himself lucky to be stationed aboard the Galactic Unity, humanity's first truly integrated interspecies research vessel. The massive ship housed over 3,000 beings from 47 different civilizations, all working together to explore the unknown reaches of space. As the head of xenobiology, Marcus spent his days studying the fascinating diversity of alien life forms, but he never expected to become the subject of such intense scrutiny himself. The incident happened during what should have been a routine diplomatic dinner in the ship's grand hall. Representatives from various species gathered monthly to maintain harmony and discuss ongoing research projects. Marcus sat at the human table, making polite conversation with Dr. Sarah Kim from the engineering department, when he noticed her. Zara Ka was unlike any Vorthak he had encountered before. Her species was known for their pale blue skin, elongated limbs, and distinctive cranial ridges that marked their neural development. Most Vorthak stood nearly 7 feet tall with an elegant, almost ethereal appearance. But Zara Ka was different. She was smaller, more compact, with darker blue markings along her arms and face that seemed to shimmer in the artificial lighting. What struck Marcus most was the way she watched him. Her large, amber eyes tracked his every movement with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. When their gazes met across the crowded hall, she didn't look away like most aliens did when caught staring at humans. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, a gesture that among Vorthak indicated curiosity or interest. "She's been watching you for weeks," Sarah whispered, noticing Marcus's distraction. "Haven't you noticed?" Marcus shook his head. His work kept him busy in the lower decks of the ship, primarily in the laboratory sections. He rarely ventured into the common areas where different species mingled freely. "Who is she?" "Zara Ka. She's part of the Vorthak Cultural Exchange Program. Supposed to be studying human social dynamics, but honestly, she seems more interested in studying you specifically." Before Marcus could respond, the dinner was interrupted by a commotion at the Centaurian table. Two of the horse-like beings had gotten into a heated argument about territorial rights on their home world. Their voices rose to an alarming pitch, causing several smaller species to flee the hall in distress. Marcus stood to help mediate, as he had done many times before. His calm demeanor and patient approach made him popular among the various species as an unofficial peacekeeper. He approached the arguing Centaurians with his hands raised in the universal gesture of peace. "Friends, please," he said in accented Centaurian. "We're all here to learn from each other. What seems to be the problem?" The larger of the two Centaurians, a stallion named Tor Khan, snorted angrily. "This fool claims the northern territories of Centauri Prime belong to his herd, but my family has grazed those lands for generations." Marcus spent the next 20 minutes carefully mediating the dispute, using a combination of Centaurian law and galactic regulations to find a compromise. By the time he finished, most of the other diners had returned to their meals, the crisis averted. As he turned to return to his table, he found Zara Ka standing directly behind him. Up close, she was even more striking. Her skin had a luminescent quality that seemed to pulse gently with her heartbeat. The dark blue markings on her face formed intricate patterns around her eyes and temples. "You handled that well," she said in perfect English, her voice carrying the melodic quality typical of her species. "Most humans would have tried to impose their own cultural solutions." "Thank you," Marcus replied, somewhat flustered by her proximity. She stood closer than most aliens felt comfortable with humans, close enough that he could smell the faint floral scent that all Vorthak carried. "I've found that listening usually works better than talking." "Interesting philosophy." She studied his face with those intense amber eyes. "Most species believe strength comes from dominance. You seem to find it in understanding." Their conversation was interrupted by the ship's communication system, announcing the end of dinner service. As beings began filing out of the hall, Zaraka stepped even closer to Marcus. "I would like to continue this conversation," she said softly. "Perhaps you could show me your laboratory. I am very interested in your work with genetic adaptation." Marcus felt heat rise to his cheeks. In human terms, her request seemed almost intimate, but he reminded himself that different species had different social norms. "Of course, I'd be happy to give you a tour sometime." "Tomorrow," she said. Not quite a question. "After your shift ends." Before he could respond, she reached out and touched his arm lightly. Her skin was surprisingly warm, and he felt a slight tingling sensation where her fingers made contact. "Until tomorrow, Marcus Chen." She walked away with the fluid grace typical of her species, leaving Marcus standing alone in the nearly empty hall, rubbing his arm where she had touched him. The next day passed slowly, as Marcus found himself distracted by thoughts of his upcoming meeting with Zaraka. His colleagues in the lab noticed his unusual behavior. "You seem nervous about something," Dr. Patricia Williams observed as Marcus accidentally dropped a sample vial for the third time that afternoon. "Everything all right?" "Fine," Marcus replied quickly, cleaning up the spilled specimen. "Just thinking about the Vorthak Cultural Exchange Program. Fascinating species." Patricia raised an eyebrow but said nothing more. She had worked with Marcus for 2 years and knew he wasn't typically prone to nervousness or distraction. As his shift ended, Marcus made his way to his laboratory in the xenobiology section. He had spent the last hour of his shift preparing a basic presentation about his research into genetic adaptation among spacefaring species. The work was important for understanding how different beings might evolve during long-term space travel. Zaraka arrived precisely on time, appearing at his lab door with that same intense focus he had noticed the night before. She wore the standard Vorthak environmental suit, modified for the ship's atmosphere, but somehow she made it look elegant rather than practical. "Thank you for agreeing to this," she said as she entered the lab. "Your work has been mentioned in several cultural briefings. They say you understand alien biology better than most of your own species." Marcus felt himself blushing again. "I just find it fascinating how life adapts to different environments. Each species has evolved unique solutions to the challenges of their worlds." For the next hour, he showed her various specimens and explained his research. Zaraka listened with rapt attention, asking intelligent questions that demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of biology. She seemed particularly interested in his work on human genetic markers and adaptation responses. "Humans are remarkable," she said as they examined a holographic display of human DNA sequences. "Such genetic diversity in a single species. Most worlds produce much more uniform populations." "We've always been wanderers," Marcus explained. "Humans spread across every environment on Earth, adapting to different climates and challenges. It's probably why we've taken to space travel so naturally." "Yes," Zaraka said softly, moving closer to the display. "Adaptable, resilient, protective of those you consider yours." Something in her tone made Marcus look at her more carefully. She was staring at the DNA sequences with an intensity that seemed almost hungry. "On Vorthak," she continued, "we have a concept called chantel. It means finding one who complements your own nature perfectly, one who fills the spaces in your spirit." "That sounds beautiful," Marcus said, though he wasn't sure where the conversation was heading. Zaraka turned to face him fully, and her amber eyes seemed to glow in the lab's soft lighting. "I have been watching you, Marcus Chen, studying you. The way you move through conflicts like water, finding the path that others cannot see. The way other species trust you instinctively, the way you protect without dominating." She stepped closer, and Marcus felt that same tingling sensation he had experienced when she touched his arm the night before. "Among my people," she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "When we find our Chantel, we must claim them. It is not a choice. It is a biological imperative." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, Zaraka moved with startling speed. Her hand shot out and grasped his left arm just above the elbow. Her grip was firm but not painful, and he felt that tingling sensation intensify. "Zaraka, what are you—" She pulled his arm toward her and, without warning, bit down on his forearm through his shirt. Her teeth were sharper than they appeared, easily penetrating the fabric and breaking his skin. Marcus gasped in surprise and pain, but found he couldn't pull away. Her grip was stronger than any human's, and something about her bite seemed to paralyze the muscles in his arm. As her teeth remained embedded in his arm, she leaned close to his ear and whispered in a voice thick with emotion, "Mine." The word sent a shiver through Marcus's entire body. It wasn't just the meaning, but something in her voice, something primal and absolute that spoke to parts of his brain he didn't understand. When she finally released him, Marcus staggered backward, clutching his bleeding arm. 2 perfect puncture wounds marked where her canine teeth had penetrated his skin, and the area around them tingled with an almost electric sensation. "What did you just do to me?" he gasped, pressing his other hand against the wounds to stop the bleeding. Zaraka stood perfectly still, her amber eyes now definitely glowing with an inner light. "I have claimed you," she said simply. "You are mine now, Marcus Chen, and I am yours." "I don't understand." "You will," she said, moving toward the lab's exit. "The bonding process takes time to complete, but it has begun, and it cannot be undone." She paused at the door and looked back at him with an expression that might have been satisfaction or possessiveness. "Others will sense it soon. They will know you belong to me." With that, she was gone, leaving Marcus alone in his lab with 2 bleeding puncture wounds and a head full of questions. He treated the bite marks with the medical supplies in his emergency kit, but even after the bleeding stopped, the tingling sensation remained. Over the next few days, Marcus tried to return to his normal routine, but it quickly became clear that something had changed. The first sign was Dr. Williams's reaction when he arrived at the lab the next morning. "Marcus," she said, looking up from her workstation, "you smell different." "What?" He stopped mid-step, suddenly self-conscious. "I mean, not bad different, just different, like you've been around alien pheromones or something." Marcus touched the bandage covering the bite marks on his arm. He had hoped to keep the incident quiet until he could figure out what had happened. But it seemed that wasn't going to be possible. The real confirmation came during lunch in the communal dining area. Marcus was sitting with his usual group of human colleagues when a Centaurian approached their table. Torkan, the same stallion he had helped mediate the territorial dispute between just days earlier. "Marcus," Torkan said, his large nostrils flaring as he spoke, "you have been marked." "Marked?" Dr. Kim asked. "What do you mean?" Torkan's ears flicked nervously. "He carries the scent of a claimed male. A Vorthak female has bonded with him." The humans at the table exchanged confused glances, but Marcus felt his stomach drop. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means," Torkan said, backing away from the table, "that you now belong to her. And she is. How do humans say? Very territorial about her possessions." As if to emphasize his point, Torkan glanced nervously around the dining area before quickly leaving. Other aliens who had been nearby also began moving away from the human table, leaving Marcus and his colleagues in an expanding circle of empty space. "Okay," Dr. Williams said slowly. "What exactly happened between you and that Vorthak female?" Marcus looked down at his arm, where the bite marks continued to tingle beneath their bandages. "I think I may have gotten myself into something I don't understand." As he spoke, he caught sight of Zaraka across the dining hall. She was sitting with the other Vorthak, but her amber eyes were fixed on him with that same intense possessiveness. When their gazes met, she tilted her head in that curious gesture he was beginning to recognize, and he could swear he saw her smile. The tingling in his arm intensified, and Marcus realized with growing certainty that his life aboard the Galactic Unity was about to become much more complicated. She bit my arm and whispered, "Mine." Second document. The isolation began gradually, then accelerated with alarming speed. Within a week of the incident in his laboratory, Marcus found himself eating alone in the dining hall. Colleagues who had worked alongside him for years now avoided eye contact and found excuses to leave when he approached. The few humans who still spoke to him did so with obvious discomfort, as if he had contracted some mysterious disease. The situation became more bizarre when Marcus discovered that aliens from different species had entirely different reactions to his presence. The herbivorous species, like the Centaurians and the crystalline Zephyrians, avoided him completely, often fleeing when he entered a room. But the predatory species behaved differently. The reptilian saurians watched him with what appeared to be newfound respect, while the insectoid hive mind delegates actually seemed to defer to him in ways they never had before. Dr. Williams finally confronted him about the situation during their third day of working in uncomfortable silence. "Marcus, you need to tell me what's going on," she said, setting down her instruments and turning to face him fully. "Half the ship acts like you're radioactive, and the other half treats you like some kind of visiting dignitary. What did that Vorthak do to you?" Marcus had been dreading this conversation, partly because he didn't understand it himself. "Her name is Zaraka, and she bit me." "She bit you?" Patricia's eyebrows shot up. "Like aggressively?" "No, not aggressively, more like—" Marcus struggled to find the right words. "She said something about claiming me, that I belong to her now." Patricia stared at him for a long moment. "Marcus, do you have any idea what that means in Vorthak culture? I was hoping you might know something about it." "I'm an engineer, not a xenoanthropologist, but I think you need to talk to someone who understands alien mating rituals, because that's what this sounds like." The word mating sent a chill through Marcus. He had considered the possibility, but hearing it stated so bluntly made it real in a way that terrified him. That evening, Marcus made his way to the ship's cultural liaison office. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the head of interspecies relations, was one of the few people on the ship who specialized in understanding the complex social and biological imperatives of different alien races. "Ah, Marcus," Dr. Tanaka said when he arrived at her office. "I've been expecting you." "You have?" "Word travels fast on a ship this size, especially when it involves a cross-species bonding incident." She gestured for him to sit in one of the chairs across from her desk. "Tell me exactly what happened." Marcus recounted the events in his laboratory, from Zaraka's strange behavior to the bite itself, and her whispered declaration of ownership. Dr. Tanaka listened without interruption, taking notes on her tablet. "I see," she said when he finished. "This is complicated." "What does it mean? What did she do to me?" Dr. Tanaka leaned back in her chair, choosing her words carefully. "The Vorthak have a very specific mating system. They don't form casual relationships the way humans do. When a Vorthak female identifies what she considers to be her ideal genetic and psychological complement, she initiates a bonding process." "Bonding process?" "The bite you described serves two purposes. First, it introduces specialized enzymes into your bloodstream. These enzymes alter your pheromone signature, marking you as claimed territory to other Vorthak and many other species. Second, it creates a biochemical dependency. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Dependency? Vorthak saliva contains compounds that, once introduced into another being's system, create a need for regular contact. Without periodic renewal of these compounds, the affected individual experiences withdrawal symptoms, anxiety, depression, physical discomfort. That's essentially drugging someone without their consent. From a human perspective, yes. From a Vorthak perspective, it's ensuring that their chosen mate doesn't abandon them. Their species evolved on a world where resources were scarce and partnerships were essential for survival. Once a pair bonds, they remain together for life. Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling the beginning of a headache. So what happens now? Can it be reversed? That depends on several factors. How strong is your natural resistance to the compounds? How deeply has the bonding progressed? And Dr. Tanaka hesitated. And what? How you feel about Zaraka herself. The bonding process works both ways. The Vorthak female also experiences biochemical changes that bind her to her chosen mate. If both parties are willing, the bond can become mutually beneficial. But if one party resists, what happens if I resist? The Vorthak female will become increasingly aggressive about maintaining the bond. She'll see any attempt to avoid her as a threat to her survival, and you'll experience increasingly severe withdrawal symptoms until you either submit to the bonding or what? Or your body rejects the compounds entirely, which can be unpleasant. Marcus left Dr. Tanaka's office with more questions than answers. As he walked through the ship's corridors, he noticed that the alien reactions to his presence seemed more pronounced than ever. A group of Centaurian engineers actually pressed themselves against the walls as he passed, their large eyes wide with what looked like fear. When he reached his quarters, he found Zaraka waiting outside his door. She stood perfectly still in the corridor, her hands folded in front of her in a gesture of patience. When she saw him approaching, those amber eyes lit up with unmistakable pleasure. "Marcus," she said, his name rolling off her tongue like music. "You look troubled." "I've been learning about Vorthak mating rituals," he said, stopping a few feet away from her. "You might have mentioned what you were doing before you did it." "Would you have consented?" The question was so direct it caught him off guard. I don't know." "Humans think too much," she said, stepping closer. "You analyze and debate and hesitate while opportunities pass you by. My people understand that some decisions must be made with certainty, even if understanding comes later." Despite his anger and confusion, Marcus found himself responding to her proximity. The tingling sensation in his arm had been growing stronger over the past few days, and now it seemed to spread through his entire body when she was near. "What you did was wrong," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "What I did was necessary," she replied, moving closer still. "You are remarkable, Marcus Chen. I have studied your species for months, and I have never encountered a human with your particular combination of traits. Strong enough to command respect from predatory species, gentle enough to earn trust from prey species, intelligent enough to navigate complex social situations without creating enemies." She reached out and touched the bandaged area on his arm, and Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. The constant low-level anxiety he had been carrying for days suddenly lifted. "You feel it," she said, not a question. "The need for contact. It will grow stronger over time." "This is manipulation," Marcus said, though he didn't pull away from her touch. "This is evolution," she corrected. "My species learned long ago that the strongest partnerships are those that cannot be easily broken. What you call manipulation, I call insurance." And if I don't want this partnership? For the first time since he had met her, Zaraka's confident expression faltered slightly. Then you will suffer, and so will I. The bonding process affects both participants, Marcus. I cannot simply choose another mate now. My biochemistry has committed to you. So we're both trapped. Or we're both chosen. She studied his face carefully. Tell me honestly. When you look at me, what do you feel? Marcus considered lying, but found he couldn't. Attraction, confusion, fear. The fear will pass, the attraction will grow, and the confusion. She smiled, showing those sharp canine teeth that had marked him. The confusion is just your human mind trying to rationalize what your body already knows. Before he could respond, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing outside his quarters with her scent in his nose and her touch still tingling on his skin. That night, Marcus experienced his first real withdrawal symptoms. He woke up in the middle of the ship's night cycle with a crushing sense of anxiety and loneliness that seemed to have no source. His skin felt hypersensitive, and he found himself unconsciously rubbing the bite marks on his arm. The symptoms persisted through the next day, making it difficult to concentrate on his work. Dr. Williams noticed his distraction but didn't comment, perhaps understanding that whatever was happening to him was beyond normal human experience. By evening, the symptoms had become severe enough that Marcus could barely function. His hands shook as he tried to eat dinner alone in his quarters, and he found himself checking the door repeatedly, hoping for a visitor he was afraid to name. When Zaraka finally appeared at his door, the relief was instantaneous and overwhelming. "You're learning," she said simply, entering his quarters without invitation. "This is torture!" Marcus gasped, though he made no move to prevent her from approaching. "This is adaptation." She sat beside him on his small couch, close enough that their bodies touched along one side. "Your body is learning to recognize what it needs. I need my independence. You need me." She touched his arm again, and the relief was so intense it was almost painful. "As I need you." For several minutes, they sat in silence while Marcus's symptoms gradually subsided. Despite his intellectual objections to the situation, he couldn't deny the physical relief her presence provided. "Tell me about your world," he said finally, hoping to understand her perspective better. "Vorthak is a harsh planet," she said, her voice taking on a distant quality. "The seasons are extreme, and survival requires absolute cooperation between mated pairs. Those who cannot form strong bonds do not survive to reproduce. So this bonding process is biological. Everything important is biological, Marcus. Love, loyalty, protection, sacrifice. Your species tries to separate emotion from biology, but they are the same thing. What you call falling in love is just your body recognizing genetic and psychological compatibility. But choice is an illusion your species maintains to feel better about biological imperatives. You chose to help those arguing Centaurians because your neurology compels you to resolve conflict. You chose to show me your laboratory because you were attracted to me. The choices feel free because they align with your nature." Marcus wanted to argue with her logic, but found himself too tired and too grateful for her calming presence to mount a strong objection. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we complete the bonding process. You learn to accept what your body already knows, and I learn to understand the complexities of human psychology." She turned to face him fully. "Unless you truly wish to fight it, but I should warn you, rejection of a bonding this far advanced can be dangerous for both of us." "Dangerous how?" "My body has committed significant resources to this bond. If it fails, I will enter a biochemical depression that may be fatal. And you—" She touched his face gently. "You will find that human willpower has limits when fighting Vorthak bonding compounds." The implicit threat in her words should have made him angry, but Marcus found himself strangely comforted by her honesty. At least she wasn't pretending he had any real choice in the matter. What would completion involve? Time together. Physical contact to reinforce the bonding compounds. Eventually, if you choose it, full mating. And if I don't choose it? Then we maintain the current level of bond indefinitely. You will need my presence to remain emotionally stable, but the relationship need not become sexual unless you desire it. Marcus leaned back against the couch, feeling more exhausted than he had ever been in his life. This is insane. This is life, Zaraka corrected. Messy, complicated, driven by forces beyond conscious control. The only question is whether you fight it or accept it. As she spoke, Marcus became aware that other crew members were avoiding his quarters. He could hear footsteps in the corridor that deliberately detoured around his section. Whatever was happening to him, its effects were spreading beyond his immediate presence. "The other aliens," he said. "They're afraid of me now. Not afraid of you, afraid of challenging my claim." Her amber eyes glowed with satisfaction. "They can sense the bonding compounds in your system. To them, you now carry the scent of a mated Vorthak male. But I'm not Vorthak. No, you're something much rarer." She leaned closer, her breath warm against his ear. "You're a human who has been chosen by a Vorthak female. That makes you uniquely dangerous." Dangerous. Humans are already feared for your unpredictability and aggression. Add Vorthak territorial instincts and bonding strength. She smiled that sharp-toothed smile. Most species would rather not test what that combination might be capable of. Marcus realized with growing alarm that his situation was more complex than he had imagined. He wasn't just dealing with an unwanted alien courtship. He was being transformed into something that other species viewed as a potential threat. She bit my arm and whispered, "Mine." Third document. The crisis came 2 weeks after the bonding began, triggered by what should have been a routine diplomatic incident. Marcus was working late in his laboratory when the ship's emergency alert system activated. All department heads were summoned to the main conference room for an urgent meeting. As head of xenobiology, Marcus was required to attend, despite his recent social isolation. When he entered the conference room, the reaction was immediate and dramatic. Several alien representatives immediately stood and moved away from the central table, creating a wide buffer zone around any seat Marcus might choose. The Centaurian delegate actually left the room entirely, muttering something about unsafe proximity to bonded predators. Captain Sarah Rodriguez, a veteran of 15 years in interspecies diplomacy, watched this exodus with obvious frustration. "Dr. Chen, please take a seat anywhere you're comfortable." Marcus chose a chair at the far end of the table, hoping to minimize the disruption, but even this failed to convince all the aliens to return to their seats. The meeting proceeded with nearly a quarter of the participants standing against the walls. "We have a situation developing in Sector 7, Captain Rodriguez began. The hegemony patrol ship Dominant Will has intercepted 3 refugee vessels from the Outer Rim conflicts. They're demanding we surrender the refugees for processing. The hegemony was a militaristic alliance of species known for their aggressive expansion policies and brutal treatment of civilians. Their interpretation of processing refugees was universally understood to mean slavery or worse." "What's our diplomatic position?" asked Dr. Tanaka. "Officially, we're a research vessel with no authority to interfere in hegemony operations," the captain replied. "Unofficially, we have over 200 civilians aboard those refugee ships, including children." A heated debate erupted among the assembled representatives. The more cautious species argued for strict adherence to diplomatic protocols, while others pushed for intervention despite the risks. The discussion quickly devolved into the kind of circular argument that could last for hours without resolution. Marcus listened to the debate with growing frustration. He had seen refugee ships before, overcrowded vessels carrying families fleeing war zones, often with minimal supplies and no real destination. The thought of children being handed over to hegemony processors made his stomach turn. "What if we offered to take the refugees aboard?" he said during a brief lull in the argument. The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward him, and Marcus realized he had just done something unprecedented. A human bonded to a Vorthak had proposed a course of action that would require consensus from dozens of nervous alien representatives. "Dr. Chen," Captain Rodriguez said carefully, "that would require authorization from all member species aboard this vessel. It would also put us in direct conflict with hegemony authority." "The hegemony respects strength," Marcus said, surprised by the confidence in his own voice. "If we present a united front, they'll back down rather than risk a confrontation with a joint fleet vessel." "And if they don't back down?" asked the Saurian representative, one of the few aliens who hadn't moved away from the table. Marcus felt a strange certainty wash over him, a confidence that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his normal analytical mind. "Then we fight them." The reaction to these words was electric. Several more aliens backed toward the walls while others leaned forward with obvious interest. The predatory species in the room all focused on Marcus with new attention, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. "Dr. Chen," Dr. Tanaka said slowly, "are you speaking for yourself or for someone else?" Before Marcus could ask what she meant, he felt a familiar presence behind him. Without turning around, he knew Zara Ka had entered the room. The scent of her pheromones seemed to fill the space, and he felt the bonding compounds in his system respond with a surge of energy and clarity. "He speaks for both of us," Zara Ka said, moving to stand beside Marcus's chair. "The Vorthak delegation supports immediate intervention to protect the refugees." "The Vorthak delegation?" Captain Rodriguez looked confused. "I thought your people preferred neutrality in most conflicts." "We prefer survival," Zara Ka corrected. "And we understand that sometimes survival requires decisive action." She placed her hand on Marcus's shoulder, and he felt a wave of strength and determination flow through their bond. "My mate has identified the correct course of action." The word mate sent a shock through the room. Several alien delegates began whispering urgently among themselves, and Marcus realized that Zara Ka had just made their relationship official in the most public way possible. "Is this true?" Captain Rodriguez asked Marcus directly. "Are you claiming to speak for the Vorthak delegation?" Marcus looked up at Zara Ka, seeing something in her amber eyes he hadn't noticed before. Absolute confidence in his judgment. She trusted him to make decisions that would affect not just their personal relationship, but the political position of her entire species. "Yes," he said, and felt the rightness of the decision resonate through the bond between them. "The refugees need our protection, and we have the resources to provide it. This isn't just about diplomacy, it's about who we choose to be when innocent lives are at stake." What happened next surprised everyone in the room, including Marcus himself. The Saurian representative stood and moved to stand beside Zara Ka. "The Saurian collective agrees with the mated pair," the reptilian declared. "Strength respects strength. The hegemony will not challenge a vessel that includes bonded Vorthak and their allies." One by one, other predatory species began moving toward Marcus and Zara Ka. The Arctian pack hunters, the crystalline Zephyrian warrior poets, even the normally isolationist Void touched, all declared their support for intervention. Within minutes, a clear divide had formed in the room. On one side stood the traditional prey species, advocate for caution and diplomatic solutions. On the other side gathered the predators, united behind the unprecedented partnership between a human and a Vorthak female. Captain Rodriguez looked between the two groups with obvious amazement. "In 20 years of interspecies diplomacy, I've never seen anything like this." "You've never seen a properly bonded pair before," the Saurian representative explained. "When apex predators choose each other, other hunters recognize the strength of their union. We follow those who demonstrate superior judgment. And Marcus has demonstrated superior judgment? Human creativity combined with Vorthak determination? The Saurian's laugh was a harsh sound, like grinding stones. The hegemony should flee now while they still can. The debate that followed was unlike anything Marcus had experienced. Instead of the circular arguments typical of diplomatic discussions, each species stated their position clearly and decisively. The herbivorous species expressed concern about the risks of confrontation, while the predatory species outlined specific tactical advantages. Marcus found himself at the center of the discussion, but not as a passive participant. The combination of his own analytical skills and the confidence flowing through his bond with Zara Ka allowed him to see solutions that satisfied multiple concerns simultaneously. What if we approach this as a rescue operation rather than a confrontation, he suggested. We offer to escort the refugee vessels to neutral space, claiming it as a humanitarian mission rather than political interference. The hegemony won't see the difference, Dr. Tanaka pointed out. They will if we make it clear we're not challenging their authority, just exercising our own, Marcus replied. We're not telling them they can't process refugees. We're telling them they can't process these refugees. A territorial claim, Zara Ka added, her grip on his shoulder tightening with approval. Something the hegemony understands and respects. The solution that emerged from the discussion was elegant in its simplicity. The galactic unity would approach the hegemony vessel under the banner of interspecies cooperation, claiming the refugees as subjects for a joint research project on civilian integration protocols. The presence of multiple apex predator species would make the claim credible, while the humanitarian nature of the mission would satisfy the concerns of more peaceful delegates. Are we all in agreement? Captain Rodriguez asked. The vote was unanimous, though Marcus noticed that several herbivorous species abstained rather than voting against the majority position. As the meeting broke up, he found himself surrounded by predatory alien representatives who wanted to discuss tactical details and express their approval of his bond with Zara Ka. Unexpected development, the Saurian representative said, studying Marcus with new respect. Humans were already formidable. Humans with Vorthak partners. He made a sound that might have been approval or concern. The galaxy will need time to adjust. As the alien delegates filed out of the conference room, Marcus realized that something fundamental had changed. He was no longer just Dr. Marcus Chen, xenobiologist. He was now half of a bonded pair that other species viewed as a new form of apex predator. How do you feel? Zara Ka asked as they walked back toward his quarters together. Different, Marcus admitted. Stronger but also more responsible. Like I'm representing something larger than myself. You are. We are. She smiled, showing those sharp teeth. My people have a saying. The bond makes two into one, but one stronger than either could be alone. Is that what's happening to us? What do you think? Marcus considered the question as they walked through corridors that seemed subtly different now. Other crew members still avoided him, but the quality of their avoidance had changed. Instead of the fearful retreat he had grown accustomed to, he now sensed something closer to respectful caution. I think, he said slowly, that you've turned me into something I never expected to be. I've helped you become what you always were, Zara Ka corrected. Humans are natural apex predators, but your society teaches you to suppress those instincts. The bonding simply removed the suppression. They paused outside his quarters, and Marcus realized he no longer thought of them as solely his. At some point during the past 2 weeks, they had become their quarters. The mission tomorrow, he said. It could be dangerous. Yes. Are you concerned? I'm concerned about you. If something happens to me, what will the bond do to you? Zara Ka's expression softened. showing invulnerability he had rarely seen from her. "The same thing it would do to you if I were lost. But Marcus," she touched his face gently, "we are stronger together than either of us could be apart. That strength will protect us both." The next morning, the confrontation with the hegemony vessel went exactly as Marcus had predicted. When the galactic unity approached with its full complement of predatory species backing their territorial claim, the hegemony captain chose discretion over valor. The refugee vessels were transferred to neutral space without incident. Marcus watched the successful conclusion of the mission from the bridge, Zaraka beside him, and realized that his life had been completely transformed. The bite mark on his arm had long since healed, but the bond it had created continued to grow stronger each day. "No regrets?" Zaraka asked quietly. Marcus looked around the bridge, noting how the crew moved with new efficiency and confidence. The successful mission had proven that their unusual partnership could produce remarkable results. More importantly, over 200 civilian lives had been saved because they had chosen to act rather than debate. "No regrets," he said, and meant it. As the galactic unity set course for their next destination, Marcus reflected on the irony of his situation. He had begun this journey as a lone scientist studying alien life forms. Now he was part of an unprecedented interspecies partnership that other beings viewed as the emergence of a new type of apex predator. Zaraka had been right about one thing. The bond had made them both stronger than either could have been alone. What she hadn't mentioned was that their strength would inspire other species to form similar alliances, creating a new model for interspecies cooperation. The herbivorous species still avoided him, but they no longer fled his presence. The predatory species treated him with the respect reserved for proven leaders, and the humans on the ship had begun to look at him with a mixture of awe and curiosity, as if he represented a new possibility for their species' future in the galaxy. "What happens next?" Marcus asked as they left the bridge together. "Next, we continue to grow stronger," Zaraka replied. "The bond is permanent, but it's also still developing. In time, you'll gain access to Vorthak genetic memories, and I'll learn to understand human emotional complexity." "Genetic memories?" "The accumulated wisdom of my ancestors passed down through our bonding practices. You'll learn things about survival and leadership that no human has ever known." The implications of this revelation were staggering, but Marcus found he wasn't frightened by the prospect. The past few weeks had taught him that evolution sometimes required dramatic leaps rather than gradual change. As they walked toward their shared quarters, Marcus noticed that the corridors no longer seemed empty around them. Other crew members had begun nodding respectfully when they passed, and he caught glimpses of aliens watching them with what appeared to be admiration rather than fear. "They're getting used to us," he observed. "They're recognizing what we represent," Zaraka corrected. "The future of interspecies cooperation, not through careful diplomacy and cultural exchange programs, but through the creation of new forms of partnership that transcend individual species limitations." That night, as they settled into their routine of physical contact that maintained their bond, Marcus asked the question that had been bothering him since the beginning. "Did you plan all of this? The way other species would react? The political implications?" Zaraka was quiet for a long moment. "I planned to claim the human I found most compatible with my nature. Everything else has been a fortunate consequence." "Fortunate for whom?" "For everyone aboard this ship who will benefit from having a bonded pair capable of bridging the gap between predatory and prey species. For the refugees we saved today. For any future conflicts that require the kind of decisive leadership that can only come from absolute trust between partners." Marcus laughed softly. "So you accidentally created a new form of interspecies diplomacy?" "I successfully claimed my chosen mate," Zaraka corrected with satisfaction. The fact that our union serves a larger purpose simply proves that my selection process was sound. As Marcus drifted off to sleep, feeling the steady warmth of Zaraka's presence beside him and the continuous low-level tingle of their biochemical bond, he reflected on how completely his life had changed. He had lost his human independence but gained something far more valuable, a partnership that made him stronger, more confident, and more capable than he had ever imagined possible. The bite mark on his arm had faded to a barely visible scar, but its effects continued to reshape not just his own life, but the social dynamics of the entire ship. Other crew members had begun forming closer interspecies partnerships, inspired by the success of his bond with Zaraka. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but Marcus no longer faced them alone. He had been claimed, bonded, and transformed into something new, a hybrid of human adaptability and Vorthak determination that represented a new model for what interspecies cooperation could achieve. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers, but as Marcus felt Zaraka's presence in his dreams, he knew they would face whatever came next together. The bite that had seemed like an assault had become the foundation for something unprecedented, a partnership that transcended species boundaries and created new possibilities for survival among the stars. In the end, her whispered claim of mine had been more than possessiveness. It had been prophecy.